everyone. I'm Lucy Cuevas de Sena, and today we're going to talk about students with emotional and behavioral disorders together with my group mates. So here's are the objectives. At the end of the chapter, the student should be able to first explain the concept on personality development, adaptive and maladaptive behavior. Second, define the terms emotional and behavioral disorders and delinquency. Third, enumerate and explain the etiological factors and potential causes. Fourth, enumerate and describe the classification of emotional and behavioral disorders. Fifth, enumerate and discuss the characteristic of children with emotional and behavioral disorders. Sixth, enumerate and discuss the etiological factors and causes of emotional and behavioral disorders. Seventh, describe the assessment tools and procedures in identifying this type of children. Eighth, enumerate and describe the educational approach for this type of children. Lastly, design a simple intervention program for students with emotional and behavioral disorders. Without further ado, let's start our discussion. Fear in the Playground by Reader's Digest, February 2003. The following article on bullying written by Lam Lei Ching shows how serious the problem has become in Asia. Research shows that bullied children often fail to focus on their studies. Like for this kind of article. Juan Reyes summoned all up his courage as he walked through the yard on his Manila secondary school in November 2001. An older, larger boy had been picking on the 12-year-old for weeks. He had teased Juan mercilessly, calling him crying baby in front of the other kids. When Juan asked his terminator to stop, the bully had responded, "Why should I?" Now, Juan finally decided to confront the bully. "Why do you keep insulting me?" he nervously asked the bigger boy. The bully responded by grabbing him by a collar and shaking him. A brief fifth fight ensued before a school employee broke them up. Moments later, the bully clutched his chest and fell to ground and died. An autopsy later revealed the boy had died of a heart attack brought on by the underdiagnosed heart condition. Weeping and covered brushes, Juan told an investigator after the fight. "He kept on teasing me. This is the only time I stood up for myself. And look what happened." Juan was charged with homicide in jail for 3 days. Before he was released on jail, the case is still pending. The tragedy is that the boy's death and Juan and Krish could have been prevented. However, schools, parents, and even the students themselves are not doing enough to address the problem of bullying. According to an exclusive Reader's Digest poll of 2,500 parents of secondary school children in 5 cities. Bullying is all common in Asia. Nearly 1 in 5 respondents knew of bullying incidents at their child's school in the past years. Almost 60% felt bullying was a serious problem generally. The problem appears to be particularly pronounced in Manila, where 1 in 4 parents said there had been bullying at their child's school in the past years. Indeed, 1 in 8 Manila parents said their own child has been bullied in the past 12 months, double the number of Singapore and Kuala Lumpur. Just as disturbing are the effects on bullying revealed in our poll. 50% of the bullied children suffered physical injuries and 27% needed counseling. Progress at school was affected for one-third of the bullying victims, while most respondents said their child's school was taking the problem of bullying seriously. Experts across Asia paint a different picture, which is Dr. Agnes Bueno, a child psychiatrist at St. Luke Medical Center in Manila, says bullying is often ignored or the school does not know about it, so deals with it ineffectively. Dr. Teo Sian Jin, a consultant clinical psychologist in Kuala Lumpur who helps school runs anti-bullying campaign, agreed not enough is being done, and there is still a lot of hardcore bullying taking place. Parents have every reason to be concerned. Bullying speak on any perceived difference, like shyness, plumpness, being too clever, too attractive, being the wrong color or symbol in the wrong place at the wrong time. Sustained bullying can leave child feeling depressed, like they can lose confidence and have suicidal thoughts. Bueno says they cannot focus on their studies and become defiant, and younger kids can become hyperactive. So it's essential to solve the problem as soon as possible. Like for this kind of article. During recess, one day, 12-year-old Singapore student Cecilia Chan was confronted by two classmates, a boy and a girl. They tempted her to steal school supplies from her, demanded that she buy snack for them every day. For 3 months, Cecilia brought the snack with her own pocket money. She became depressed and her schoolwork began to suffer. In desperation, she called the Think of Friend, the only children hotline in Singapore. We persuaded her to tell her parents and teacher and taught her how to confidence and strong about it. Say Think of Friend coordinator Christina Apado. Cecilia parents called her school and a meeting was arranged with the parents of the bullies. The bullies later apologized, paid back the money of the snack, and underwent counseling. Cecilia and the girl who terminated her even become a friend. Instead of parents and teachers acting alone to help children being bullied, it's important to adopt a whole school approach to the problem, says Naigam, chairman of the Shelter Home in Kuala Lumpur, an organization that counsels children and help victims for abuse. Unfortunately, few schools in Asia take a comprehensive approach to bullying or have established anti-bullying policy, say Dr. Tu Chen Lee, senior consultant child and adolescent psychiatrist with Institutional of Pediatric of Kuala Lumpur Hospital. Schools need to take bullying more seriously as it can cause both physical and psychological damage to the children. And now let's move on to our second topic, the effective step to beat the bullies. Pull children, don't show distress. It's give the bully an emotional payoff, like what happened to Kumar Said of Kuala Lumpur. For 3 years, Kumar was called Mumbai, a degrading name of an Indian by his classmate. Kumar said, I felt angry and hurt when they called me that. Sometimes I got depressed and cried. And Christina Apado replied, that is just what the bully wants. Name calling is very common. It is often used to test the bully power over the victim and see how far he can go. Stopping it early on can prevent it from escalating into something more serious. Komar say, my parents told me to ignore it. Whenever Komar's Terminator made fun of his Indian heritage, he would pray or sing a song inside his head to help him ignore the insults. Having lost their free entertainment, the bully soon stopped. Next, don't be witness. If you see bullying happening, walk away. It implies disapproval and weakens the bully's position by removing unessential audience. The chances are he soon lose interest. Meanwhile, report the incident to an adult or to a teacher. For parents, build self-confidence. A bullied child often feels somehow to blame for the situation. A healthy self-esteem allows them to behave in positive both control manners. Many children don't know how to stand up for themselves without fighting back. For weeks, some classmates had mercilessly taunted 4-year-old Mary Garcia of Manila because she was smart, had many friends, and was popular with boys. They called her name including Beach. I told her to walk from these girls, avoid them, and go to places where they wouldn't meet, her mother says. I also helped her to write a story in her school magazine on danger of envy. This helped Perry understand how envy can lead to bullying and that she was not blamed for taunts. Next, strengthen friendship. Encourage children to make a new friend who can give moral support, going for swimming or karate class, give kids chance to make new friends, but can also build up child social skills and confidence. Like a 10-year-old Ramli of Singapore didn't want to go to school because he was being bullied. His parents arranged for some friends to walk to school with him. When the bully approached, he shouted, If you bother me again, I tell the principal. So the bullying stops immediately. Next, seek expert help. First, make an appointment to see your child's teacher. Bring a written report of the bullying incident and set a mutually agreed time limit for action to take effect. Don't telephone the bully's parents or talk to the bully yourself. Let the school to do it. If the bullying does not stop, see the principal. After this, a letter to school board of governors is in order. And now let's move on to our third topic, the influence of physical and sociocultural environmental on personality development. A lot of people asking, especially children, why are there children and youth who are happy and contented with their lives, adjust to their home situation, enjoy their families, live the body of love and respect for others, keep a lot of friends, and contaminated others with their good behavior. Why? Because the variation in human behavior are influenced by the basic determinants of personality development. So what are these? So the first one is the personal genetic background or heredity. Second is the environmental factors. And third, the genetic patterns of development. Tackle the first, the personal genetic background or heredity. In the same way that the personal genetic inheritance dates back to centuries and even eras of evolution of the family tree. One social traits are the end product of centuries and eras of social and cultural formation. Usually, the clan and family teach its member to conform to certain practices and traditions. So parents teach their children to behave in ways that are appropriate to their social status. Parents who are doctors, engineers, teachers, politicians, and other professionals want at least one of their children to follow their footsteps. Families tend to sustain and improve their social causes, occupational and religious affiliation, and parents declare that they want a good life for their children better than their own. Second, environmental factors. A person is expected to follow various social rules demanded by society. The person matures in a succession of rules in the lifespan from being a child, student, wage, inner, husband or wife, parents, parents-in-law, and senior citizens. A person conforms to the rule demand if he or she receives position with positive reinforcements such as money, prestige, and status. On the other hand, negative reinforcement like punishment, deprivation of status, and loss of prestige lead to nonconformist behavior. Third, the genetic patterns of development. The favorable and unfavorable elements in both the physical and sociocultural environment strongly foster the person's values, pattern, and attitudes. As a result, different environments shape different personality and characteristics. Thus, a person continuously interact with various groups and experience varied interpersonal relationships. He or she participates in the sociocultural environment in his own unique way, beginning the unclear and extended family members, gradually extended to peer group, classmate, friends, and other significant others in his or her social world. So personality development is very most influenced by a person's socialization experience. He or she interact with various modes of behavior patterns that cover a wide range of both positive and negative experience. He or she beha- his or her behavior patterns reflect much of his or her personality traits, which in turn generate either positive or negative responses from the social group. Ideally, social rules should be clear and comfortable for the person. However, social rules can be conflicting, unclear, and not understood, so that the end of the result are misunderstanding, quarrel, discomfort, negative feelings, and unhealthy attitude. In such cases, a person's personality development and adjustment patterns may be impaired. So it is important to remember that while heredity or genetic endowment provide the potential for behavioral and positive biological and psychological environments, the person's way of thinking, selecting options, making decisions, feeling, and acting are heavily influenced by the physical and sociocultural environment.
Good day, everyone. I am Malini Cervantes, and I was tasked to discuss the definition of emotional and behavioral disorders and classification of emotional and behavioral disorders. So, first, what are emotional and behavioral disorders? So, emotional and behavioral disorders are types of mental illnesses that produce severe difficulties with emotional and behaviors. They have an impact on a child's ability to operate in a most or all part of their life. Emotional and behavioral disorders make it difficult for a child to control his or her emotion and make acceptable behavior choices in a range of scenarios. A child's capacity to succeed in school, control feelings and activities, and be happy in general is harmed by an emotional and behavioral problem. Feelings, behaviors, social development, and cognitive functioning are all affected by this disease. Children with emotional and behavioral disorders have a difficult time coping with life many demands. So next is emotional and behavioral disorders definition. So first, disorders behavior is a product of society. There is no apparent consensus on what constitutes normal adaptive behavior and healthy mental health. Second, different theories of emotional disturbance use concept and terminology that do not present a clear meaning of the condition. Third, measuring and interpreting disorders behavior across time and setting is difficult, exact, and constantly indwellar. Fourth, cultural influences, expectation, and norms across ethnic and cultural group are often quite different. Fifth, frequency and intensity is disorders behavior is difficult to measure and control in view of the fact that children behave inappropriate at times. Sixth, disordered behavior sometimes occur in conjunction with other disabilities, such as mental retardation and learning disabilities. So, three factors were considered in determining if a child is emotional disturbed. So, it is intensity, pattern, and duration behavior. So first, intensity. So intensity is referred to the severity of a child's problem. This factor is easiest to identify if one is guided with this question. So how does it get in the way of the child's or society goals? How much does it draw attention from others? So second is patterns. Patterns means the time when the problem occur. Do problem occur only during the school days? Only during with math class, science class at home, at bedtime? Answers to this question may yield very helpful diagnosis and remediation information. So the last one is duration. So duration behavior refer to the length of time child's problem has been present. This implies that continuous observation has to be made. Some special educator required a 3 month duration before they suggest that the child has emotional and behavioral problem. Individuals with Disabilities Education Act definition of serious emotional disturbance. So, a condition exhibiting one or more of the following characteristic over a long period of time and to a marked degree that adversely affect a child educational performance. So it is include the inability to learn that cannot be explained by intellectual, sensory, or health factors, an inability to build or maintain satisfactory interpersonal relationship with peers and teachers, inappropriate types of behavior or feeling under normal circumstance, a general pervasive mood or unhappiness or depression, a tendency to develop physically symptoms or fears associated with personal or school problems. So the terms include schizophrenia. So the term doesn't not apply to children who are socially maladjusted unless it is determined that they have an emotional disturbance. So next is the Council for Children with Behavioral Disorders, definition of emotional and behavioral disorders. So in 1981, the Council for Children with Behavioral Disorders, or CCBD, the major professional organization of special educators concerned with the children with emotional and behavioral disorders, and the National Mental Health and Special Education Coalition wrote the following definition that is now incorporated in the Public Law on Special Education, or IDEA. So, emotional and behavioral disorders is a disabilities characterized by behavioral or emotional responses in school programs, so difficult from appropriate age, culture, or ethnic norms that they adversely affect educational performance. So, A. More than a temporary expected response to the stressful event in the environment. B. Is consistently exhibit in two different settings, at least one of which is school-related, and emotional behavioral disorders can coexist with other disabilities. And last, this category may include children or youth with schizophrenic disorders, affective disorders, anxiety disorders, or other sustained disturbance of conduct or adjustment when they adversely affect educational performance in accordance with section. So, the CCBD definition focuses on the characteristic and special education needs of the children and youth with emotional and behavioral disorders. All other proposed definition agree that the behavior of children with emotional and behavioral the present social or cultural norms. So, special education teacher focus on the child's misbehavior in the environmental event that trigger such misbehavior. So, additional factor considered in assessing a child who is suspected to be emotionally disturbed. So, rate. So, rate refers to the frequency of occurrence of behavior of time. Most children cry, get into fight with other children, and sulk from time to time, yet they are not emotional disturbed. Latency. So, latency refers to the time that elapses between the opportunity to respond and the beginning of the behavior. The child's behavior may have a long latency, in which he or she withholds an incorrect behavior, considers an inappropriate behavior advised by the instructor, and then complies with the teacher's request, all within a short period of time, generally a few minutes. So now let us proceed to our next topic. So, classification of emotional and behavioral disorders. So, emotional and behavioral disorders fall under four systems of classification. So first, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. So the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders is an elaborate clinical classification system consisting of 230 separate diagnostic categories or labels to identify the various types of disorders behavior as observed by psychologists, mental health personnel, and other clinicians in their regular practice. The classification system is unreliable as evidenced by clinicians' categorization of clients into various categories. Another critics of the DSM 1V classification system is its lack of educational and therapy guidelines. The guidebook contains the variable information on intervention program of therapies. So the American Psychiatric Association's 1994 cite by Zoin 2022 enumerates three criteria that must be met in determining the presence of emotional and behavioral disorders, so particularly among adults. So first, the person experienced significant pain or distress, an inability to work or play, an increased risk of death, or a loss of freedom and important areas of life. Second, the source of the problem lies within the person. Due to biological factors, learned habits or mental processes, and it's not simply a normal response to specific life events such as the death of a loved one. And last, the problem is not the deliberate reaction to conditions such as poverty, prejudice, government policy, or other conflicts with society. While the APA addresses psychological disorders, the criteria are certainly applicable to other positive causes of emotional and behavioral disorders as well. Therefore, extra caution should be exercised to avoid hasty generalization about who may be exhibit some of these characteristics. So the second classification is statistical classification. So colleagues gathered information on hundreds of children suffering from emotional and behavioral issues. Parents and instructors were requested to complete rating forms and questionnaires on the children's behavior and lives. The statistical analysis of data revealed for cluster of traits and behaviors among children with emotional and behavioral disorders. So these are the following. So A, conduct disorders. So it is a characterized by disobedience, being disruptive, getting into fights, being bossy, and tempered tantrums. B, anxiety withdrawal. So sometimes called anxiety disorders is manifest by social withdrawal, anxiety, depression, feelings of inferiority, guilt, shyness, and unhappiness. C, immaturity. Shows in short attention span, extreme passivity, daydreaming, preference for younger playmates, and clumsiness. Next is socialized aggression is marked by transy gang membership, thief, and a feeling of pride and belonging to a delicate subculture. So aggression and acting out are the major characteristic of conduct disorders and socialized aggression categories. So a significant finding in the study showed that the above clusters of behaviors appear in group rather than singly. So thus, this is the higher incidence of conduct disorders in a child who shows anxiety withdrawal, immaturity, or socialized aggression. So next is the direct observation and measurement. So 5 dimensions of the child display of the disorders behaviors are observed, measured, and analyzed. First is the frequency. So frequency indicates the rate and which the behaviors occur and how often a particular behavior is performed. Normally, disobedience, tempered tantrums, shyness, clumsiness, and happiness are displayed by most children. However, a child with emotional and behavioral disorders engaged are observed, measured, and analyzed. First is the frequency. So frequency indicates the rate and which the behaviors occur and how often a particular behavior is performed. Normally, disobedience, tempered tantrums, shyness, clumsiness, and happiness are displayed by most children. However, a child with emotional and behavioral disorders engage in the undesirable behavior most of the time and show normal behavior less often. So B, the duration is a measure of a length and amount of time a child exhibits the disordered behavior. The length and amount of the time spent in the undesirable behavior is longer and may last for an hour or more. Normal children display tempered tantrums for no more than a few minutes. So, C is the topography. So, topography refers to the physical shape or form of behavior. For example, running a race and walking each has its own topography. So, although the legs are used in both motor activities, running has its own shape or topography that differs from walking. The topography of the behavior displayed by children with emotional and behavioral disorders differ from the normal. So they are maladaptive, bizarre, or dangerous to the child himself and others. So last one is the intensity of display behavior. So intensity of the display behavior is referred to as magnitude. So for example, one's violent behavior may be of such a large volume or intensity that is affect the entire class. A person who threatens to commit suicide by jumping off tall buildings or hostage a victim display a disruptive behavior of high intensity. The police, fire department, and people in the community all get affected by the suicide incidents. So the last one is the degree of severity. Indicate the emotional and behavioral disorders can be mild and severe. So children that respond well to treatment and intervention have a modest to moderate level of emotional and behavioral problem. They are able to attend regular classrooms and collaborate well and their regular special education teachers, as well as their guidance counselors. So severe mental and behavioral disorders necessitate the aggressive treatment and intervention. So that's be all, and let us now welcome the next
Good morning, everyone. This is Gemma Rosas de la Cruz, and my assigned topic was all about etiological factors and causes of emotional and behavioral disorders. So now let us know what is emotional and behavioral disorder. It is an emotional disability characterized by the following: an inability to build or maintain satisfactory interpersonal relationships with peers and or teachers. For preschool age children, this would include other care providers like peers like that. And now there's two factors, which is the biological factors and environmental factors.
So
So now let's talk about the biological factors. It is psychologists believe that easygoing children are more prone to behavioral problems than those with a difficult temperament. The inborn temperament may not directly cause a behavior problem to occur but may predispose the child to behavior disturbances. Studies shows that even the biological impairments exist, there are no proofs to link the physiological abnormality to the occurrence of emotional and behavioral disorders. Brain is often the root source of the development of EBD. Illness or physical disability have been shown to cause or contribute to disturbances in behavior and emotion. Genetics also plays a part in the development, although the exact link remains unclear. A child's ingrained temperament can predispose them to emotional and behavioral problems. Parents are vital in the healthy development of their children. So now in environmental factors, there's have two, which is home and family influence and school experiences. Studies present pieces of evidence on the correlation between parent-child interaction patterns and the development of positive and normal behavioral characteristics in the child period. The relationship that a child has with the parents during the early years is critical to the way he learns to behave. And frequent parental involvement in providing for the child's physical and psychological needs is a significant factor in developing a healthy self-concept. Parents who create situations in a loving and caring atmosphere to meet those needs teach their children about norms of conduct and acceptable behavior, period, attention, and reinforcement, positive behavior, as well as appropriate discipline for negative behavior in an atmosphere of love and caring. Help shape desirable patterns of behavior, period. Some aspects of parenting or the home environment can contribute to emotional and behavioral disorders. Knowing how biology, development, and parenting contribute to EBD can help you take measures to give your kids positive experiences. And school influences. So, there are experiences in school where children spend a large part of the day that can participate the occurrence of behavior problems. A child who gets all the attention at home suddenly finds himself competitive for the teacher's attention with 30 other children. There are class rules to obey, unlike at home where he or she can do as he or she pleases. It is common for bigger classmates to bully the small ones, leading to fight and quarrels. When a child is not ready to handle this event, he or she resort to externalizing or internalizing behaviors. School experiences can contribute to the development of emotional and behavioral disturbances. And research data show that classroom experiences can maintain and strengthen behavior problems. Even though the teacher tries to control the situation, the child's behavior pattern learned in school as a composite behavior and attitudes learned at home that interact with his or her experiences with different teachers and classmates. However, studies shows that teachers can help children develop acceptable behavior without knowing the original causes of the behavior problems. And now, the causes of emotional and behavioral disorders are related to predisposing, precipitating, and sustaining factors in the occurrence of the said behavior. Predisposing factors refers to the tendencies and risk of develop emotional disturbances. Example of physical illness or disabilities, shyness, hyperactive behavior that may come about as a result of heredity or emotionally dysfunctional home environments. Precipitating or while participating factors refer to specific incidents but may trigger the display of emotional disturbances. Examples are death in the family, abandonment, separation of parents, and other crisis situations. The continuous presence of the predisposing and precipitating factors in the person's environment leads to the recurrence of the emotional disturbances. So, the characteristics of children and youth with emotional and behavioral disorder, which is the intelligence, intellectual characteristics, and academic achievement. So, children with emotional and behavioral disorders have average IQ scores of 86. Most of the samples scored between 91 and 90 points. The data disprove the popular thinking that these children are poor in academic work and slow learners. A higher mean score at 92.6 was achieved by these children because they attend the regular class. IQ test scores cannot account for the effect of disordered condition on a child's intellectual functioning. It is possible that the condition lowers the performance in academic tasks. According to Kaufman 1993, concluded that there are enough research data to support the concept that although the majority fall slightly below average in IQ, the estimates suggest that less than half or only 30% of American students are performing at the grade level expectation or above, according to Howard 2003. So, characteristic of a disturbed child are best described in behavioral terms. Rather than talking about a child as crazy or acting out, a more detailed explanation of specific behaviors and emotions allows all concerned parties to approach the problem with an equal understanding. General categories such as hyperactive with withdrawn may be good starting points, but giving little useful information for diagnosis or treatment options. The following behavioral characteristics are intended to explain some of the vague categories that are often used to describe EBD. You are cautioned not to make hasty generalizations based on familiar behaviors in the categories. If an acquaintance exhibits 2 or 3 of these behaviors, it probably does not mean that the person has a major pathological problem. A discussed earlier, factors such as intensity of the emotion and the length of the time it is exhibited must be considered when making an appropriate professional diagnosis. So, based on my research, these are the examples. So, studies confirm the observation that students with emotional and behavioral disorders often experience great difficulty in developing and maintaining interpersonal relationships as early as during early childhood. The problems in acquiring social skills and in maintaining healthy interpersonal relationships persist through the adolescence period and adulthood. In secondary schools, research findings show that these children tend to have low empathy for others as evidenced by their I don't care attitude towards people they inflict pain on. They participate in fewer curricular activities, have fewer contacts with friends, and show lower quality interpersonal relationships. So, these children manifest consist and frequent disordered patterns behavior that violate the rules and regulations at home, the laws of the community and the country. They show their disdain for society and its norm, engage in activities that go against the property. In the classroom where students are expected to follow certain standards, these children maintain an out-of-seat behavior, do not complete schoolwork, run around, hit and picking fight, disturb their classmates, ignored, talk back to and argue with the teachers and school authorities. complain excessively, and distort the truth. They still engage in vandalism by destroying public and private property and keep the company of known guns and criminal elements. And other characteristics are willingness to commit rule infractions, deference to adult authority, and violations of the social norms and mores of society. So, deviant behavior tendencies among secondary Filipino students revealed 5 components of antisocial behavioral Ibanez, according to Ibanez 2003. Defacing school property, creating assault or abuse toward students and school authorities and personnel, wearing or displaying an acceptable attire and grooming, and engage in activities that interfere with academic performance and violate school legal norms and policies. So, antisocial behavior patterns from the Foundation for the Clinical Diagnosis of Conduct Disorders, American Psychiatric Association 2000, period which are aggressive forms of behavior towards people and animals. Destruction of property, deceitfulness, theft, and serious violation of rules. In school setting, antisocial behavior and conduct disorders are categorized as social maladjustment. So, in order to understand an emotional disturbance, we must be able to distinguish between the students' internalizing and externalizing behaviors. When students with an emotional disturbance are experiencing stress, they will typically experience these types of behaviors. These students are typically divided into these 2 subcategories. Let's take a look at what students look like when they exhibit internalizing behaviors versus externalizing behaviors. Students with ED can also show both types of behaviors. So now, externalizing behaviors includes Williams 2013, which is the aggression, disruption, acting out, destruction of property. And externalizing behaviors are easily observable by others. The most frequent problems occur when students with ED exhibit externalizing behaviors, according to Kaufman 2009. As students exhibit these types of behaviors, may lash out at others using aggressions, violence, defiant, and criminal behaviors. And that's according to Liu 2004. And externalizing behaviors include Williams 2013 is depression, anxiety, social withdrawal, substance abuse, feelings of loneliness or guilt, feelings of sadness, nervousness and irritability, fearfulness, difficulty concentrating, negative self-talk. So, internalizing behaviors are not always as easy to observe. These negative behaviors are directed towards the self. A student exhibiting these types of behaviors may hurt him or herself and not lash out on others. These students are more likely to be rejected by same-age peers and adults. So, aggression refers to acts that are abusive, that severely interfere with the activities of other people or objects and events in the environment. Examples of the milder forms of aggression are teasing, clowning around, tattling, and bullying. Severe aggression includes threat, physical harm, physical attack, and destruction of property and cruelty. And now, delinquent behavior is defined as a criminal action committed by a human confronting the laws of the civil society. Crime understanding is based on the principle of normalization, which means that an individual's guilt is based on the norms and laws applicable in the civil society. And lastly, the procedures are similar to those used in the other types of disabilities. Teachers, parents, peers, and other persons report cases of simple offenses like being beaten up, stealing, smoking, sniffing rugby, and similar juvenile offenses. Scheming is done to eliminate children who do not have behavior problems. The children who show the early signs or who seemed to be at risk are developing emotional and behavioral disorders are identified. And that's all. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I am Jason, and I will discuss the assessment procedures and educational approaches for children with emotional and behavioral disorders. First, we will talk about assessment procedures. Assessment procedures plays a foundational role in special education. Students with EBD are complex learners who have unique needs that exist alongside their strengths. Effective special education teachers have to fully understand those strengths and needs. Thus, these teachers are knowledgeable regarding assessment and are skilled in using interpreting data. This includes formal standardized assessment that are used in identifying students for special education services, developing students' IEP, and informing ongoing services. Then the individualized educational plan for each student should be put in practice and include the necessary modification in relation to the assessment of knowledge as well as the specific goals that should be attained for each student individually. Children with emotional and behavioral disorders is more difficult than the older ones. Department of Education has developed assessment materials for this particular type of children. These materials are developed by Bautista year 2003, a behavior checklist, a list of action, responses, or other behavior that are to be recorded each time they are observed. By Rigonan year 2002, develop an aggression inventory scale is a self-report scale that is designed to measure four major components of aggression: the physical aggression, verbal aggression, anger, and hostility. Ibanez year 2003 developed the Deviant Behavior Tendency Scale that determines the range of deviant behaviors. Next is educational approaches. There are several models for understanding and treating emotional and behavioral disorders that special educators, therapists, and psychologists practice by combining certain features of conceptual models and develop an electric approach in developing programs for particular groups or individual students. The first approach is the Applied Behavior Analysis or ABE approach, and its techniques can be used to help EBD children improve their social skills, self-care skills, communication skills, play skills, and ability to manage their own behavior. It can also help reduce difficult behavior like inattention, aggressions, and screaming. ABE intervention deal with behaviors that are important when implementing ABE interventions. Teachers are targeting behaviors that are essential to the child. Like for example, the child may be instructed to shake hands when meeting a new person or say thank you when given something. This technique is particularly effective for developing social skills among children. The next approach is teaching social skills. Teaching social skills helps students succeed in classroom environments, develop healthy friendship, and build other critical personal relationships. Skills are first, self-related behaviors, accepting consequences, ethical behavior, expressing feelings, and positive attitude towards self. Second, task-related behaviors, attending behavior, following direction, performing before others, and quality of work. Third, environmental behaviors, care for environment, dealing with emergencies, and lunchroom behavior. Fourth is interpersonal behaviors, accepting authority, gaining attention, helping others, and making conversations. The last approach is Teaching self-management skills. There are 5 main steps in creating self-management plans with students. First is identify and define the behavior that they needs to change. What do inappropriate behaviors look like, and what do appropriate ones look like? Second, determine baseline behavior and reasonable growth to expect. How regularly are these problem behaviors happening? What level of growth does the students need to show in order for the behavior to be considered under control? Third, discuss the reason for adopting the plan. Assist the students in coming up with intrinsic reason why modifying this behavior would be advantageous to them. Fourth, share the plan with students. Fifth, discuss the particulars of its implementation. This is particularly important because the students will be directly involved in the plan's implementation. For example, a behavior chart may have areas for both teachers and students to evaluate how well the student exhibited appropriate behaviors in a class period. Self-management is a useful technique to assist individuals with EBD to achieve greater levels of independence.
And now let's talk about intervention procedures that minimize behavioral problems. First in our list is the ecological intervention, a principle that problem exists within the child's environment, where a constant global interaction between the child and the environment occurs. In ecological intervention, initially, the point of encounter between the child and people or events in the environment are identified. Then, the cultural source of the problem is traced in terms of the people, cultural practices, and other influences in the community. And intervention procedure is developed and applied to the problematic situation. We have 2 kinds of reinforcement, the positive and negative reinforcement. Positive reinforcement is universally accepted intervention designed to increase the display of desirable behavior and reduce or decrease the opportunity for negatively viewed behavior. On the other hand, negative reinforcement involves removal of negative stimulus or contingent upon the desired behavior. Thus, a child is allowed to have recess when he or she finishes the seat work. In extinction, the reinforcer for a behavior that has been previously reinforced is withheld. Extinction is useful in reducing the number, intensity, or duration of undesirable behavior. For example, when a teacher consistently ignores inappropriate talk, the student may at first talk louder to get the teacher's attention. And eventually, if the behavior is consistently ignored, the student will cease talking because he or she is not getting any reinforcement from the teacher. Rule setting is an easy and effective way to manage behavior in the classroom. A few simple, realistic, and easy to follow. Rules are set together with the consequences if they are followed or violated. Positive reinforcement is applied when rules are followed. When a rule is broken, the teacher may use body language to send the message by stopping the lesson, eye contact, and other ways. Pacing the lesson and using variety of activities. Simple yet effective ways of managing behaviors, including some activities use games, humor, proximity control, and letting others follow the example. The teacher can model the desired behavior without verbal cues. There are other educational strategies found to be effective to minimize behavioral problems. Cognitive strategy, a self-monitoring, self-instruction, and self-control strategies are utilized. The goal is to help the students to develop self-awareness and self-direction by using positive reinforcement for social development and improve academic performance. The students record his or her own behavior or academic scores, and sometimes the teachers does the recording and they compare notes of their ratings. And if the ratings are consistent, the student receive an extra reinforcer. One advantage of self-management cognitive strategy is that it allows the student to generalize to intervention from one setting to another, and help students understand what undesirable behavior is, when and where it had occurred, and what the consequence. Cognitive model is also called information processing model. Emphasizes strategies for memory, storage, retrieval, and metacognition. A good example is use of mnemonics and acronyms to remember a list, concept, thus thought. Another cognitive strategy is learning prefixes and suffixes to assist the student in learning the meaning of words.